Hey beautiful people, welcome back to Angelic Embrace, where we document and narrate the glorious and life-changing near-death experiences sent in by you guys. It is greatly appreciated. So sit back, relax, know that you are loved, and let's get into today's near-death experience story. Consider subscribing and watching to the end to find out what happens. The operation on my open heart took place early in the morning of August 5, 2103. The next morning, on August 6, 2021, after the operation described above, I was weaned off of the ventilator early in the morning. I was told to get some fresh air by taking a short stroll around the intensive care unit. My stomach was in knots when I got back from the stroll, and I passed out in the intensive care unit room. I didn't realize how long I had been coding for till much later. I was given CPR, and then I was taken back into surgery as quickly as possible. As a result of the failure of the bypass procedure in my left anterior descending artery, I had stents implanted there. Since August 6, 2021, an additional bypass procedure has been unsuccessful, and I currently have 7 stents implanted in 2 of the bypassed arteries. The outcome of the third bypass procedure is still unknown, and we are continuing to closely watch it. I coded once more on the surgical table on August 6, 2021, while the catheterization procedure was being performed. After being taken off of the ventilator, I was given sedation. After the catheterization, echocardiograms were conducted, and the results showed that the patient's heart rate was dangerously low. I remained in this condition from Friday morning until Monday morning, when I awoke to find that my echocardiogram revealed that the function of my heart was normal. I experienced a variety of experiences between the time I went to sleep and the time I got up in the morning. I don't remember precisely when these experiences took place or if they were even linear, but I suspect they were linear because it entailed my making a decision about returning to my body. I can't remember exactly when these experiences took place or if they were even linear. I remember not being terrified and being in a vacuum at the time. I remember watching a playback of a life review, but there was no evaluation or commentary linked to it. I remember being in the company of a guide, but I don't remember really seeing that guide. I only remember communicating telepathically with them. I don't know how long I drifted around in this area, but it was for quite some time. I seem to recall having an out-of-body experience during which the medical staff was speaking over my body and expressing concern that they did not know how much longer my other organs could continue to function in light of the amount of medication I was receiving and the function of my heart at the time. I believe it was about that time that I became aware of the possibility that I may not make a full recovery. I believe that I expressed that I was exhausted and prepared to depart. That's what I meant by bored of life. I recall being worried for both my children and my husband, but I was also prepared to go. The guide explained to me that I was not prepared to go on to the next phase of life because my soul was not prepared. My education is not complete. Some of the most important lessons were not taught to me. Even the relationships we hold dearest, like those between a parent and a child or a spouse and a spouse and a spouse, were not as close as we like to think they were. I do remember coming to the realization that every one of our connections is ephemeral and designed to teach us something or help us develop as people. They are nearly transactional in the sense that we teach other people lessons that are necessary for our own development. Our connection is fleeting, and throughout the course of our lives, we will have many more like it. I was also aware, though I can't explain how, that we have many lives before this one, and that this one is only a momentary stop along the way. I remember that the guide told me that I would either be able to go back to my body or be reborn. I came across a lady who was caring for a little kid, but she was a member of a different racial group than I am. At the time, I remember thinking that I did not want to go through this again, nor did I desire her life. If I had to go back, I wanted to be with the people that I knew and loved. I suppose it was at that point that I settled on the choice to go back to my body. After that choice was made, I remember racing to return back to my body as quickly as possible. The phrase that I remember repeating the most frequently was that I needed to get back to my guys. I remember traveling through an area where I could sense the presence of my deceased loved ones, but I was aware that I did not have the opportunity to linger and have a conversation with them because I needed to return to my physical body. I don't remember how I got back to my body. It wasn't like I went through some kind of portal. I simply remember waking up. I don't remember how I got back to my body. When I woke up on Monday, they had already performed another echocardiogram, and everyone was shocked by how well my heart was operating and how rapidly I began to acquire strength. As a result of COVID-19, I was restricted to having just one visitor per day. Thus, my husband and my kid took turns coming to see me. I remember that when my son came to visit on Tuesday, I was still quite sedated, but I could see that I was growing stronger. I also remember how shocked he was when he came back on Thursday and I was up walking and chatting for the duration of our stay. This was my near-death experience, because it was not made clear to me what it is that I need to know in order to be prepared to move on to the next phase. I suppose you could say that I did not really acquire any secret knowledge. The only thing I learned was that our consciousness continues after our bodies die and that we can and do have multiple lifetimes. I did find out that we do not take the wisdom of those previous lives with us from one incarnation to the next. Instead, each new life is like starting from scratch. No, that doesn't really expense how some individuals did actually have recall of those prior lives, but my knowledge and experience led me to believe that we are not intended to have that remember. No, that doesn't truly expense how some people did actually have recall of those past incarnations. On to the following account of a close call with death. My family is what the majority of people would perceive to be huge and extended. We are a powerful, successful, loving, and gifted group that is widely recognized in the community that surrounds us and is highly regarded by its members. I am the youngest of 3 children and the only female among us. I have always had a passion for music and singing, and I welcome new acquaintances with open arms and without prejudice. I was a decent girl, but I had a really naive outlook on life. As a youngster, I was exposed to a lot of stress because of my biological mother and the poor choices she made, as well as the fact that she would occasionally pop up in my life. That is the only thing that makes sense to me or connects me to the events that took place and altered the course of my life forever. After being missing from my life for a significant amount of time owing to her drug addiction and mental health issues, my mother re-entered it when I was a young adult. She was able to persuade me to move in with her so that I could assist in her care, and I did so. After living with her for a few years and having limited contact with my dad, stepmother, and brothers, I realized I wanted to get away from my living circumstances and began staying at the houses of my friends. I was asked one day to come check out a studio in the basement of a friend's house to sing on an album they were making. That is where I met Bobby, who kept me imprisoned by horrifying and constant physical, mental, and emotional abuse and threatening to kill me for 3 long years. He did this. I was unable to communicate with my family during this time, but I soon learned that he had gotten into serious difficulty with the marshals and was on the run until he was ultimately apprehended. During that time period, the only persons or close family members I knew were those with whom he or we were connected on a daily basis, particularly a man named Mike. After he was arrested, he received a sentence of 15 years in prison, and I was able to be back with my family after undergoing therapy and counseling, all owing to Marshall's courageous and hard-working team, which I will be eternally thankful for. On April 21, 2010, I went to see a friend of mine at her mother's house. While I was there, she informed me that she was going to have some friends around later that day. Mike, Bobby's best buddy and someone I hadn't seen since before the arrest, was one of the people that showed up to her house. I hadn't seen Bobby since before the arrest. He was there with 2 men, none of whom I had ever spoken to before, and both of them particularly urged me to follow them to their house so that we could hang out there. I was hesitant at first, but they persisted, and eventually I gave in. My buddy begged me not to attend since she had a horrible feeling about it, but I reassured her that everything would be okay no matter what happened. Because Mike was the only one who was there for me during the terrible days with Bobby, I had complete faith that he would look after me. We started driving towards our goal, with the males riding together in one car while I followed behind in mine by myself. Because it was dark and we had been driving for a considerable amount of time, I had no idea where I was. Once I arrived there, I was given a drink right away, and I noted that the person who made it took a glass and mixed the drink while facing the top open freezer of the refrigerator with his back turned to me. I accepted the drink. I found it strange, but I didn't give it any consideration beyond that. When I had finally finished my beverage, I recalled gazing out the window and noticing that the sun was beginning to rise. I recall that in an instant I was overcome with a tremendous feeling of fear, which was immediately followed by a sense of urgency. I do not know where the other gentlemen were located. All I could see was Mike lounging on the sofa near to the front entrance and looking out the window. When I got there, I proceeded to sit next to Mike on the couch, but then I heard a very loud and clear voice say, "Ashley, you need to go immediately, get out." I gave Mike a look and told him that I needed to go right now. His reaction was, "No, that is not a good idea." He inquired as to my well-being before informing me that it was not wise for me to go at this time. After failing to persuade me to remain, he begged me to drive him home instead. As we drove away, I had a momentary recollection of us dropping him off and then pulling out of his driveway. The next thing I remember, I was sitting outside of my car, leaning up against the rear tire of my vehicle. I do not recall experiencing any other feelings but completeness, absolute quiet, and relaxing. It was so hot and brilliant, but there was no sun in the sky. It was just a lovely blue sky. I recall looking up at the sky at the time. I turned to look at my surroundings and saw that I was in a gorgeous mountainous region surrounded by fields of golden wheat. I moved my head to the right toward my front tire, and there was a woman sitting next to me. She had on a blouse with blue and white stripes, and her gorgeous brown hair was curly. My initial reaction was that she looked like she's from the 1980s. She was gazing at me while weeping, but I was unable to feel any reaction or emotion in response to her tears. I just recall being perplexed as to why she was sobbing, but there was no feeling of sadness or anger associated with my perplexity in my memory. I was only aware of a single sensation, and although it was pleasant and peaceful, my thoughts were aware that the sensation I had whenever I looked at her was one of perplexity. She continued reassuring me that everything is going to be okay and that this whole ordeal is now behind us. She was communicating with me despite the fact that her mouth was completely still. She reassured me that everything was resolved and that I would be okay now, telling me again that it was finished and that I was fine now. My body temperature dropped drastically, and I found that my attention was drawn away from her and onto the sky above me, which had become a dull gray color, and I could faintly hear sirens in the distance. When I woke up in the hospital, the nurse was feeding me lasagna and green beans, and I was wearing a brace around my neck. After that, someone entered the room, put some counterfeit money on the foot of my bed, and asked me to figure out how much $1 worth of coins was. I was unable to, and the failure made me feel irritated. After some time had passed, I found out that the neighbor of the house I was staying at on the morning of the accident had gone for work and found my handbag in their yard before leaving. They thought that something was off and searched through my handbag, where they discovered my identification. In the absence of any additional contact information, the couple who found my handbag searched me up on a social networking site and connected me to our family's restaurant, where we had worked during the establishment's early stages of operation. The couple phoned the restaurant and asked for me, but when they did, they were informed that I was no longer employed there. The pair claimed that they had discovered my handbag and promptly alerted my family. My brother then proceeded to phone every hospital in the area until he located me. After that, I learned that on the morning of the accident I called my birth mother and told her that I was driving down the road with Mike and that I had a shotgun out the window, and that I was hunting ducks and that I was coming home so that she could cook them for me. After that, I disconnected the call, and immediately after that, my mother started praying in what she refers to as the prayer of tongues. When my father came to take me home from the hospital, I reassured him that I was okay by explaining that this woman had been with me the entire time and had been taking care of me. After she had finished explaining herself to him, he appeared as though all the color had left his face. He looked through my baby book and found a few images to show them to me. Almost immediately, he realized that the woman in one of the pictures was the same one who was sitting outside my car with me. My dad went on to tell me that her name was Trish and that she had been my nanny when I was first born. She also lived with us at the faith-based home that my parents managed, which was called Park House. When I was 1 year old, Trish passed away in a car accident caused by a rollover. I also found out that a woman who was driving behind me on the highway the morning of the accident saw my car cross the median into oncoming traffic, where it then struck a tree and rolled down a steep embankment. This information was provided to me by a woman who was driving behind me on the highway. Because I was not located outside of my car, I had to have assistance getting out of it. Mike and the other two men, who purportedly had orders to terminate my life, sedated me before putting their plan into action to kill me. A couple of months after the incident, I was participating in a youth group program that brought us to the adjacent state of Wisconsin in the middle of nowhere to attend a Sunday service. The building had a capacity of little more than 100 people at any given time. After the ceremony, I went to the common area to have some coffee, and while I was there, a very elderly woman came to me and said, "I heard you saw my daughter Trish. Trish used to create songs and music. Would you find them for me, her poems?" That is the only part of our talk that I can recall. I am currently and for the rest of my life married to my very best friend and the love of my life, and we share a house together. I have a career that I like so much because it allows me to assist other people, and my family and I have never had a more intimate connection. I am appreciative that you have taken the time to read my tale. I have faith that even one word of what I have spoken will be of some use to someone out there.